This is one of my favorites. And this, my cousin Daniel, he thought Mr. Hatton was this man's name. He lived in Tupelo. His wife lost her diamond ring set, just the set out of the ring. And they went to Seymore, and he asked her to describe the day before, what she'd been doing the day before she lost it. She told him, usual house chores. Seymore told her she threw her diamond out with the dishwater, and one of her diamond necker chickens had swallowed the diamond. She also had Rhode Island Reds. So she went home and started killing chickens. The 17th chicken hadn't set. Sounds too good to be true. That one, let me tell you kind of a negative story now. That's really a good positive one. This was actually by distant cousin Tommy Carol Howell in Amory. She told that a man was seeking a missing gun and went to Seymore. Seymore advised the man that his nearest neighbor had stolen it. When he returned home, he accused his neighbor of stealing the gun. The neighbor denied he stole the gun, and he became angry and threatened violence. Like, get out of here, I'm going to shoot you. Later, the man went to another farm rental house that was actually closer to his house and found his gun. The falsely accused man never forgave Seymore or the other man. This is a story about Shannon man. A wealthy man from Shannon died. He had 2 sons and a daughter. Both sons knew their father kept his money in an iron safe in the home, but it was a hidden safe. The money was missing. The son who did not get any money came to Seymore and told his story. Seymore told him that the other brother had taken the money, that they had a garage that had wooden running boards on the inside. The money was buried under the wooden running boards. The brother went home, later encouraged his sister to give the other brother a party. At the party, the honest brother took up the running boards, found the money, and distributed it equally at the party. That sounds far-fetched too, doesn't it? This next story is that's a man from Bartman who owned a hardware store and kept missing some store goods. He and his son went to see Seymore, and they rode horses from Bartman up to Woodland. The man told his son that he wanted to test Seymore before he asked him about his stolen goods. So as they turned off the road to go down to Seymour's house, the daddy told son, take your saddle off and put it in this hog lot right here. So he did. So they went on, later found Seymore in the pasture. First the daddy asked him, he said, well, we've lost the saddle. That's why we came. And Seymore looked at him and told him, he said, well, that saddle y'all put in that hog lot, the hogs are chewing on it. So he immediately sent the son back to get the saddle, and Seymore told the man the house where his missing goods were located, and apparently the man went and found his missing items. I got a couple of more. These are from my aunt who recently died. She lived in California. She grew up in Hulk. Her stories are pretty flowery in detail. She says, I graduated from Hulka High School in 1931, and it was several years before Miss Fanny Baskin, a local resident, lost her Elgin wristwatch, and she was accusing her grandson who lived with her and his friends of knowing where the watch was. It troubled the grandson, and he sought answers from some of his friends and teachers at school who suggested he quit teasing his grandmother, that she'd probably just gotten where she put it, and to continue helping her look for it. And one day the grandson got home, and Granny told him she wanted to go to see Seymore Prater. My Aunt Helen puts this in. This was a laugh, but for those who Seymore helped, it was pretty serious. The next day, we saw from school the old Dodge with the wooden spokes in the wheels headed toward Pontotoc. Just before school ended for the day, the old Dodge was returning back, and Miss Fanny was not talking, but instead of slowing down as they usually did as they came through town, they did not slow down that day. The next day, Miss Fanny was wearing her golden Elgin wristwatch, and she came to school at lunch to explain how she found it. Apparently she'd been shopping in Houston and bought a sack of apples. She was sitting before an open fire in her living room peeling an apple when she noticed an unwelcome guest coming to her front door. Miss Fanny did not care to share her apples with the guest, so she hastily dropped the paring knife she was using, the peeled apple and the apple peelings back into a sack, and she set the sack just inside the closet door, behind the door. Miss Fanny went to get the watch in the usual place. It wasn't there. She did not remember the apples. Her watch had fallen off her arm when she dropped the knife. The apples and the peelings were in the sacks. She'd later thrown all the apples and peelings out into a worm bed in her backyard. She went out when they got back, dug in the worm bed, found the knife and her watch, dirty but still working. You want to tell your dog story?
Sure. I've heard this story since I've worked here. I wish I could remember the name of the man who told me. He was visiting, he came back to visit Union County. He had lived out in the Cownville area, and he was in his 70s, and he and his brother came to the museum one afternoon, and I've tried to remember how the name Seymore Prater came up, and I'm thinking he had probably asked me if I'd ever heard of him. And of course I had, and he's told me that his dad went to see Seymore Prater when he was a child living here. It was a dog that they valued, and apparently hunting was part of their sustenance, and it came up missing. And he said that his daddy hitched the wagon up and they went to Pontotoc to ask Seymore Prater about the dog, and Mr. Prater told him that their dog had gone to Arkansas. He said, if you'll notice about a half a mile, he said, you live on a dead-end road, and he said the people who live at the very end of the road have packed up and gone to Arkansas, and they took your dog. Well, there really wasn't any way to verify that story because they were pretty stationary where they were. And this man later on in life became a minister, and he was preaching at a revival at a church in Marks, Mississippi, he told me, and somehow the fact that he was from Union County came up, and one of the women in the congregation was also had grown up in Union County. And they began to talk about it, and it turns out that she was a little girl in the family down the road from where they lived near Campbell. She said, you know, we lived at the end of that dead-end road. And he said, y'all just picked up and moved one night, didn't you? And went to Arkansas. And she said, yes, we did. And she said, and your dog followed us. So, 50 years later, I guess that story was verified.